Welcome. This is episode 5 of the Even Year Dynasty show. My name's Cody. If you are joining us Monday night, hope you had a great Monday. If you are tuning in with us on Tuesday morning, hopefully we can make your commute go by a little bit better. On this episode, we are going to talk about the Giants prospect review for 2023, as well as talk about their farm system as a whole. Talk about some players who may have raised their stocks this past year, as well as some whose stock went down. We're going to talk about guys who I think may contribute to the 2024 season in San Francisco, as well as a few that may be potential trade pieces in the Giants' quest to try and acquire a bat. Without any further ado, we are going to start with the top 16 prospects. Now, I rated these by MLB.com. Off of their list. Depending on which site you use, the order may be different. I know Fangraphs and Baseball America do their own lists. I'm just going to use the one off of MLB.com. They do a top 30. I'm only going to do the top 16 in this episode. I will talk about a couple other guys that aren't going to be listed on there. But we will go ahead and just get started with that. Now here's the list. I'll have it running on the ticker below. Starting off with number 1, we have Kyle Harrison, who was a top 20 prospect in all of baseball off these same rankings. He's been pretty well regarded as the top left-handed pitching prospect in baseball for about the last 2 years now. Struggled in Sacramento a little bit last year, had a 4.5 ERA, came to San Francisco, actually pitched a little bit better. Not all that surprising. In AAA right now, they have the ABS system, the automated balls and strikes, which, one of the things with Kyle Harrison is he likes to live kind of at the top of the zone a lot, especially with his fastball. And supposedly it does tighten. The zone with the ABS system is a little bit tighter up at the top. He did struggle a lot with his command down in AAA. He had almost a 6.4 walks per 9. When he got to San Francisco, he actually lowered that to about 2.86. Now, I wouldn't necessarily sit here and try and say his command is suddenly fixed now that he was in San Francisco. He definitely did have outings where he struggled to throw strikes, was kind of all over the place. I mean, the last outing he made against the Dodgers on the final day of the season, he, I believe, hit 3 batters and walked 2 guys. Now, he gave up 0 hits. It was in 5 innings. So, it wasn't all bad. It almost reminded me of one of the old Jonathan Sanchez starts back in the, 2009, 2010 timeframe. But, a guy like him, he's got a legit 70 grade fastball, which is elite. I think it plays exceptionally well at the major league level. Watching him throw last year, it was pretty clear that major league hitters had a hard time hitting his fastball. He has a really good plus slider and changeup as well. He's a guy that I think as he learns to throw strikes and more consistently, he's going to be very difficult to hit. His delivery, just from what I see, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Chris Sale, kind of with his delivery and his stuff a little bit. I would love if he's ever that good, may or may not, but kind of just who he reminds me of when I watch him throw. One thing that I do think he needs to improve on, he did give up 18 home runs last year, including 8 in the majors in only 30-something innings. The ones in Sacramento, it's the Pacific Coast League. I don't put too much stock in that. But one thing I did notice when I would watch him pitch is I think he needs to work on changing the eye levels of the hitter a little more frequently. I know one of the home runs I remember he gave up to Soto, he threw 3 or 4 high fastballs in a row. And it was like, at some point, you got to throw something low and change his eye level. I know he likes the fastball up in the zone, but I do think he needs to, try and throw that down at the knees more frequently. And kind of, like I said, change the eye levels. It's great to have that high fastball as a put away pitch. I don't think he should just be living up there every pitch. So that's one thing I'd say he needs to, that I'd like to see improve next season. But sky's the limit with that kid. Number 2 prospect for the Giants is going to be Marco Luciano. Had kind of an up and down season last year. Um, he had the fractured back, I believe he suffered, or it was like a stress fracture in his back that he suffered in winter ball of last offseason, which completely wiped out his spring training, and he missed like the first month of the season. When he came back, I mean, he was just a strikeout machine. And it was kind of a pattern you see with Marco Luciano, because then later in the year, when he suffered that high hamstring strain and he missed 3 weeks, he came back and struck out a ton. And it's almost like he has to settle back in when he returns from these injuries, and it takes him just a long time, which, I mean, that's not the most uncommon thing, but definitely, quite a bit of swing and miss to his game. He did strike out about 37.5% of the time in San Francisco last year, as well as well over 30% in AAA. It's legit 70 grade rod power, though. Between him and Bryce Eldridge, they have by far the best power in the system. Um, easily the best power prospect the Giants currently have, at least that they currently have, that's close. Likely going to start the season as their starting shortstop, barring some sort of changes, some surprises, I should say. Did hit only 223 across the minors, hit 233 in San Francisco. Did hit 15 home runs, though, and pretty limited at bats overall, and had a 776 OPS, which was impressive in considering how many games he played in the Eastern League, which is super pitcher friendly. A lot of his swing and miss is outside the zone. He is super patient. He'll work the count. He's walked about 12 to 15% of the time in his, at each stop, he typically walks about that frequently. When I watch him, I mean, his body, and this is more his body type and kind of his swing through the zone, reminds me a lot of Alfonso Soriano, just, kind of a long, lanky guy, still pretty built, but long, lanky guy that just has a lightning bat. Ken, I'm not predicting he's going to be that guy. That's who he reminds me of when I see him and when I see him swing the bat. Produces some ridiculous exit velocities. I think he had 3 of the top 6 exit velocities on the Giants last year, 3 of the top 8, I think it might have been. When he does get the barrel on the ball, it goes hard. So, I'm excited to see him next year. I mean, the strikeouts are certainly concerning. They're not all that surprising for a guy that's so patient. He works his way into a lot of 2-strike counts. It's just going to happen sometimes with guys like that. Hopefully he can cut it back and get it down into the, 25 to 27% range. But I mean, he's probably the guy with the best chance, I think, on the team, which is crazy for a rookie. But if you told me if you asked me one guy that has the potential to go hit 30 next year on the team, I'd easily point to Marco Luciano. He's got the best pop on the team. So we will see how he does. The number 3 prospect in their system is going to be Carson Whisenhunt. He absolutely blew through the minors last year. First full season of pro ball. He was a 2nd-round pick in 2022. He had 2.45 ERA across 3 levels. He's going to go into his age 23 season next year. I don't know. He only threw about 20 innings, I believe, in AA before he had suffered an elbow sprain. So there's a chance that they may put him back in AA. I wouldn't be surprised either way, though, if they start him in AA or AAA. He's a guy that if he continues on the path he was on, he very well might find himself in San Francisco at some point, or potentially whatever team may trade for him. We will get to that one in a little bit. But he's also on the MLB.com's top 100 list. He was ranked number 70. Pretty crazy. The Giants have, really 3 of the best left-handed pitching prospects in baseball. We'll get to the third and a little lower on the list, but he kind of reminds me of a little bit of a Cole Hamels type pitcher. He throws harder than Hamels did. Hamels was always more of a finesse guy. He's got about a mid-90s fastball and a plus curveball and plus command, but his real pitches, he's got a 70 grade elite absolute Bugs Bunny changeup that just makes guys look silly. And really, the guys in low A and high A last year had absolutely no chance against him, against that changeup. I don't think any of those guys had ever seen a changeup like that in their life. So he's an exciting guy. I think between him and Harrison, he probably has a higher floor. The fact that he has better command and he still has plus stuff, I think he's probably like going to be the safer. But then again, if Harrison can reach his ceiling, I mean, I look at that as a guy that might just be truly dominant and unhittable for a period of time and could win, a Cy Young potentially. So we'll kind of see how those shake out. Bryce Eldridge, he was their first round pick. He's going to go into his age 19 season. He's got the nickname the American Ohtani, no pressure kid. 70 grade raw power, massive power. He hit 294 across the ACL in San Jose last year, had a 905 OPS, hit 6 home runs. Now 5 of them came in the ACL. He only hit 1 in San Jose. Has good control of the bat. He struck out 26% of the time, which, to me is reasonable for a guy with huge power. Nothing too crazy there. 15% walk rate. As for his swing, again, these you guys can go ahead and roast me if I'm throwing out some crazy stuff here, but I only mean through the ball. His stance is a little different. And I only mean through the ball in the follow through, but I swear, watch him swing and then go watch an old Will Clark highlight. Just the swing itself looks so similar. So he's the American Ohtani because he also pitches. As far as his pitching goes, mid 90s fastball, low 80s slider. He's 6'7", so he's got that nice downward plane. Could be decent, he could be good. He's more likely to stick at the plate though, and really, they're going to let him pitch starting next year. They didn't want him with the layoff between high school and pro ball last year. They didn't want to his arm had already kind of geared down, and they didn't want to gear it right back up, so they didn't have him pitch in 2023. But they have said they're going to let him pitch next year, and my hope is that they don't hold his bat or his bat back, I should say, in order to try and let his arm catch up. To me, his bat is probably going to rifle him through the system. And if it does, they shouldn't be holding him back to see if he can still pitch. They should just be like, cool, if your arm can't keep up, you're going to hit. That is what it is. So we'll see how that goes. Number 5 on the list is going to be Walker Martin, shortstop. He was their second round pick this year. He was a quarterback in high school, posted some absolute video game numbers as a shortstop in only 25 games in high school. He had 633 average with 20 home runs and 75 RBIs. And I get he's from Colorado, but I mean, you could be playing in a wiffle ball field as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to hit 20 home runs, 633 and 75 RBIs, that's impressive. Didn't play professionally at all this year. I think I read that they just kind of similar to Eldridge in the sense that he had already done so much that year, and they just didn't want to gear him back up right at the end. Gap to gap power plus, kind of has positive grades across the board as far as fielding, his throwing, his running, everything. Kind of an average arm from what I'm reading. They may end up having to move him off shortstop eventually, but he could probably play almost anywhere. So we'll see kind of how that plays. Their number 6 prospects can be Rainer Arias. He's going to be the son of Pablo Arias, who I know played professionally at one point. I don't think he ever made it to the majors. I believe he only got to AAA, but he's going to be going to his age 18 season this year. He was only 17. Played in the Dominican Summer League. was limited to only 58 at bats, but he did hit 14 with a 1300 plus OPS and 4 home runs. Um, Injured his wrist diving for a ball, and that cut his season short. Um, Very disciplined hitter, super high baseball IQ, and probably could, as his body keeps maturing, he could end up having plus power. But he's still young, hasn't had a ton of professional experience yet, so we're gonna have to just kind of wait and see on Rainer Arias. But he's definitely a toolsy guy, a lot of potential. Grant McCray is going to be number 7. He was higher up on the list last year, but had some ups and downs this year. Hit 252 and had a 777 OPS with 14 home runs in High A Eugene, which the Northwest League is a very pitcher-friendly league. Those are not bad numbers. Had a 114 WRC plus, meaning he was 14% better than average or league average at the plate. His calling card, though, is he is fast. He has legit 70 grade speed. He stole 52 bases last year. Easily the best defensive prospect or center field prospect in the system. I know Zaidi last year said, "Oh, they think Tyler Fitzgerald might be the best." No, he's not. It's if we're maybe he's the best defensive center field prospect that's close, but Grant McCray is the best defensive center field prospect in the system. Has elite range, has a 60 grade arm, big arm. Probably has 20 homer potential, but the big wart in his game is he strikes out a ton. Struck out almost 30% of the time last year, and just has just a lot of swing and miss in his game. If he ever can cut that back, I mean, you're talking about a guy, because he'll still walk almost 10% of the time, or over 10% of the time. You're talking about a guy that if he can ever cut back the strikeouts and just get the average up a little bit, he'd probably be an elite leadoff hitter and center fielder for a long time. But as it stands, we'll have to see if he can ever cut back on the strikeouts. Number 8 on the list is going to be Reggie Crawford, who had a 2.84 ERA and 32 strikeouts, but he only pitched 19 innings. Two-way player, didn't hit much. He only got a handful of at-bats last year. They're actually trying to have him hit over in the AFL this year. It's not going very well. It's pretty ugly. Probably more likely to just stick on the mound. I don't see the future at the plate really with him. 70 grade fastball, 60 grade slider, kind of a two-pitch guy. A little bit wild. They've really handled him with the kids' gloves so far. They barely let him do anything last year, and then this year they only had him throw a handful of innings. When they drafted him, he was recovering from Tommy John, so they've just been super careful with him, and he's going to go into his age 23 season next year. It's hard to sit here and say like, oh, I think he could be a great starter, because they've let him throw a whole 19 innings professionally. So we'll see if they try and stretch him out at all next year. The one thing I will say about him, though, is when you throw 100 miles an hour with a wipeout slider as a lefty, you maybe he doesn't make it as a starter, but I look at a guy like that, he could end up being like a high-end closer one day. So we'll see with him. Number 9 on the list was Mason Black. He had a really nice season last year. Ended up with a 3.71 ERA. Had about a 3.8 ERA in Sacramento, which in the PCL is pretty impressive. Actually threw 123 in a 2/3 innings last year. Struck out 155 batters. Mid-90s fastball. Touches, they've said he's gotten up as high as 98, but kind of lives in the mid-90s. Another guy with a wipeout slider, deceptive delivery, pretty good control, maybe a middle of the rotation starter, possibly a reliever. If he's a reliever, he might be a guy that, if he doesn't make it as a starter, I think he could at least be a good reliever, because he can kind of empty the tank in his one inning of work and, live in the high 90s. So Going into his age 24 season, we're going down this list and you're just seeing a ton of pitching, it looks like. And the Giants have a very clear strength in their system right now, and it's pitching. And teams around the league want starting pitching. They want guys, so they definitely have some guys they can move if they want. Um, Number 10 on the list is going to be Hayden Birdsong. He's another guy who's a 6th-round pick in 2022. Also moved pretty quick last year. 3.31 ERA, 149 strikeouts in 102 thirds innings. He's going to go into his age 22 season next year. He's got a quality 4-pitch mix. Best pitch is his fastball. It's a 60 grade fastball. Sits in the 93 to 97 range, but he also throws a curveball, slider, and changeup. It was his first full season in pro ball this year. Moved from low A to high A, dominated both levels, went up to double A. He ended up struggling a bit in double A with a 5.5 ERA. But still an impressive first year, and he's still young. I'm sure they'll have him start in Richmond again next year, and he's got potential to move pretty quick. Number 11 on the list is going to be Wade Meckler. He got a cup of coffee in the majors last year after starting the year, I believe, in high A. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's gone in. It took him about a year to get from Oregon State. He was a walk-on at Oregon State, total grinder. And all he's done since he hit the minor leagues was absolutely rake. Not a pop guy. He's definitely, bat control, kind of a slap hitter. Has 7 career home runs in the minor leagues. Only hit 6 of them last year. Has plus speed, but not a big base stealer. One of the things after his time in San Francisco they did have him get more aggressive and work on his base stealing, and he ended up stealing 13 bags on the season in the minors. So got to keep an eye on if he can develop the speed a little, or develop the base stealing ability. He's got plus speed, so that could be that could make him more of a kind of a useful player. I kind of look at him and I think, this is a guy that could probably be a 4th outfielder in the majors and be a really productive one. Get a couple spot starts, absolute grinder off the bench, gets on base. He did struggle in the majors. His routes were poor, although he's kind of viewed as a good defender. So maybe it's something he's just going to have to kind of work on and develop that part of his game. We saw the same thing with Luis Matos last year, where he struggled, especially with his routes. So yeah, I could see him being a guy that they give spot starts to, and is a good pinch hitter, pinch runner, defensive replacement off the bench down the road. Averson Arteaga is number 12. Hit 235, 709 OPS, 17 home runs in his age 20 season, which, those numbers don't really jump out at you, but yeah, he was one of the younger players in high A Eugene last year. You go around that league, he is one of the younger players in that league. It was the same thing in San Jose. They talk about him a lot like guys talked about Brandon Crawford back in the day. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I think he's going to have some kind of Brandon Crawford type career, because I really, it's a stretch. But they do talk about him a lot in similar fashion. Arteaga's slick fielding shortstop, great fielder, great glove, has pop, as evidence. He hit 17 this year in a hitter or in a pitcher friendly league. He could, he's a guy that could potentially be like a Gold Glove candidate at shortstop. I mean, he's talked about as being one of the best defensive shortstop prospects in all of baseball. Has maybe 15 to 20 home run potential someday, and has dropped his strikeout percentage each and every year. So, if the bat develops a little bit, he's a guy that maybe they eventually will move Luciano off of shortstop for. We'll see. I'm definitely a fan of his. I like his glove. kind of how I felt when Crawford was in the minors. I always was like, I don't really care if he hits. I just want the glove out there. I have the belief that you don't sacrifice defense for offense at three positions, and that's catcher, shortstop, and center field. And if he can just develop the bat enough, I think pretty soon he'll be a guy that, it might be a year or two, but I think his glove's probably ready today. So hopefully the bat can develop. Vaughn Brown is number 13. He had a bit of a disappointing season, fractured his fibula actually, and his season ended up ending early, and which was unfortunate because he also missed the early part of the year, recovering from, I think, a knee injury. So, but in his time, he did hit 242, 752 OPS, 9 home runs, 20 stolen bases. He's a big power speed guy, has 70 grade speed, actually stole home in a game last year. So that was just a fun fact. It was impressive. He is going into his age 26 season. So he's on the older side, but tons of swing and miss. Struck out about 37% of the time in Double-A. Very good defensive center fielder, though. I'm not sure how much potential he probably has, being he's on the older side, but there's always a chance that he ends up sticking around. He definitely has some tools that are really nice. Number 14 is going to be Joe Whitman, who was their third round pick this last year. Didn't do much, or didn't play much professionally this year. They did draft him this season, only threw 9 2/3 innings, but I only gave up 2 runs. Had a 1.86 ERA, 3 pitch mix, sliders his best pitch, and then fastball's kind of low 90s. We'll see. I remember seeing a list where they came out with the top 10 left-handed pitching prospects in baseball, and he was actually like the 10th best. So he has definitely some potential, and clearly the league thinks pretty highly of him. So we'll see kind of how he progresses going into his first full season in pro ball. Number 15 is going to be Landon Roop. Had a good year, but another guy that had his season cut short. Had a 1.74 ERA in Double-A, 42 strikeouts and 31 innings, but he only made 10 starts. I tried to figure out what the injury was. Everything I found just kind of said unspecified injury. So if somebody knows, feel free to fill me in the comments. But that's as much information as I found on him. Very repeatable delivery, has good control, 4-pitch mix, curveball's his out pitch. And I believe it was like low to mid 90s on his fastball. Has kind of a deceptive delivery, but he looks like a strike thrower. Everything I've seen with him. And then number 16 was Keaton Winn, who got a nice cup of coffee in San Francisco this year. He's a guy, he had a 4.8 ERA in SAC, which again, it's the PCL. I don't put too much crazy stock in that. Had a 4.68 ERA in San Francisco. He's a guy that his stuff hasn't quite matched up with his production so far. You look at his stuff and he almost reminds me of when Kevin Gossman first came to the Giants. He was a guy that had mid to high 90s fastball and just a filthy splitter. And just the numbers and like the production never backed up like how good his stuff was. And Wynn's kind of been the same case in the minors. He's never really dominated anywhere in the minor leagues. And he's got off to a good start in San Francisco, got touched up a little bit towards the end, and it kind of inflated his numbers at the very end. But, I look at Keaton Winn and I'm like, this is a guy that, he might only end up ever being a 4th or 5th starter, but you also look at his stuff and you're like, could this guy turn into like a Kevin Gossman type where all of a sudden he is just a truly dominant pitcher? And, if I was a betting man, I would bet against that. But, it also just wouldn't surprise me all that much when you see his stuff. So someone to kind of keep an eye on. We'll see. He's had good control. Seems to like he pitches to contact more than he really tries to strike guys out. So right now he's slated to probably start the year in the back end of the rotation, and hopefully he does a lot in that role. So some of the top risers in the system, three of the guys we already talked about, Carson Wisenhunt, Wade Meckler, and Hayden Birdsong, they all played it. Um, they all earned multiple promotions last year. So those would be three of the guys. Another guy, Victor Barracoto, he actually had the most home runs in the system last year. He hit 27 between High A Eugene and Double A Richmond, which are both super pitcher friendly parks. So had probably arguably the most impressive power season in the system. Has produced some ridiculous exit velocities. He actually hit a ball 120 miles an hour off the bat in San Jose back in 2022. Which you look at him and he doesn't, he's not a big guy or anything like that. So he gets some pretty crazy bat speed for a guy that's not a huge frame. Uh, I wouldn't be shocked if he starts next year in AAA, although I also wouldn't be surprised if they have him at least start off in AA and then try and earn a promotion up to AAA from there. But he's a guy that I'm actually pretty excited to see what he does next year, because for a system that's pretty lacking as far as power prospects, he is kind of an intriguing one that's getting closer to the major leagues. And then the other guy was Eric Miller. They acquired him from the Phillies in a trade. He had a really good year. Actually had about a 2.45 ERA, at a 2.77 ERA in Sacramento last year. So that kind of ERA in the PCL is very impressive. Had 88 strikeouts in 62 innings. His big issue is walks. I mean, he was walking nearly 7 batters per 9. So kind of an intriguing guy, but I think he's got a very high likelihood of being on the 40-man. They have to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. Otherwise, he could be eligible to get taken this year. And I think that he's a guy that there would be a very high likelihood of getting taken if they don't protect him. And he would probably stick wherever he goes, unless he just melts down. But he looks like he's ready to produce in a major league bullpen right now. So I think they're going to go ahead and protect him in that. Some guys that stock went down would be the main ones you're going to see are going to be due to injury, unfortunately. Hunter Bishop had Tommy John, missed the whole season. Will Bednar might as well have missed the whole season. He had a bunch of different back injuries. Jairo Pomares, I'm not sure what his injury was, but he did miss pretty much the whole season. So those are three guys that, it's unfortunate, but, it is what it is. Their stock definitely went down. And then Eric Silva, he just had a really, really rough year this year in High A. He was a guy that they were viewing very highly. I think he was in the top 10 of their prospect list before the season, and he had a rough year. Hopefully he can bounce back, though. My list of guys, now keep in mind, I'm only using the guys that are on the prospect list when I talk about these. I don't think I'm not going to include guys like Patrick Bailey or Luis Matos or, I'm not sure who else might have. Casey Schmidt, I think, graduated from the list already because of how much service time he got in the majors. But the guys that I think on this list that are most likely to contribute next season, Kyle Harrison, the obvious. I think he'll easily be one of the starters next year. Marco Luciano, right now, he's obviously slated to be in the starting shortstop, and based on Farhan Zaidi's comments, they have every intention of starting him next season at shortstop. Now, things change. He might be the guy now, and maybe they can get Willie Adames or something, and they decide, we'd rather start him and give Marco more time, or move him off shortstop. So we'll see. Or he could just outright struggle, and they have to play someone else. But as of right now, he's probably one of the most likely guys to contribute next year. Carson Wisenhunt, I'm going to go start Keaton Winn. He's right now penciled to be in one of the back end of the starting rotation. So Keaton Winn, and then two pitchers that are currently not up there, and that's going to be Carson Whisenhunt and Mason Black. Mason Black showed he was probably ready for an opportunity last year. They just didn't really have a spot for him, quote unquote. Really, it was a roster spot. It's not that they didn't have a spot in the rotation. I just think they didn't really have a roster spot to send someone down at the time. Carson Whisenhunt, if he continues on the trajectory he's on and he's still in the system, he absolutely will, I think, force their hand at some point this year because he's had some truly dominant appearances. And then the last one's Wade Meckler. Yeah, he struggled a lot this year, but he's a guy that if he just keeps hitting like he's hitting, at some point he's going to get another shot. And he's already in AAA. He's already on the 40-man roster because they put him up last year, probably too soon, but they've already done it. So he's a guy that will probably get another appearance at some point next year. And then guys, now these are going to be the players that could potentially, be used as, we'll call them trade bait, players that could be potentially used as part of a trade package because, the Giants want a star. They want a bat. They want to get younger. They want to get more athletic. They're trying to improve the team. And Farhan has made it pretty clear that they're going to be fairly active in the trade market. The short answer for, who could be potentially available? Well, depending on the player, all of them. I think there are certain players around the league that I wouldn't have a single guy that's off limits. Luis Robert Jr. is available. Take your pick, Chicago. Like I'd give up pretty much any of these guys to try and bring him in. But realistically, I think the three guys that I would mostly take off the table are going to be Harrison, Luciano, and Eldridge. I really am high on Bryce Eldridge. I don't want to trade him for pretty much anybody, but if the right guy is available, you make the deal. But for most packages, you're probably going to take those three guys off the table. I think Luciano of those three is the one they're probably most willing to part with. But the guys that I think are going to potentially be used for possible trade bait is, I'll take your pick of that list of pitchers. Carson Whisenhunt, Reggie Crawford, Mason Black, Hayden Birdsong, Joe Whitman, Landon Raup, Keaton Wynn, Tristan Beck. I mean, he wasn't on this prospect list, but, there's a ton of pitchers in their system that they can deal from. It's kind of, and this is where free agency can impact them, where you build a position of strength and you can trade from that once you have if you have a strength at the major league level, and if they go sign a Yamamoto or a Blake Snell or a Sonny Gray, some combination of Sonny Gray and Jordan Montgomery, if they go sign some guys in free agency and just create a massive strength in starting pitching, then there's no reason they couldn't trade from what they have down in the minors. And, there's always a fear that, we don't want to trade the wrong guy, but it's like, you got to give up something to get something. At some point, you're just going to have to take the risk. Some of the non-pitchers that I will throw in there as potential trade candidates, Arteaga, for one. A lot of teams would probably be interested in him. Walker Martin is going to be an intriguing guy, I think, for some. Grant McRae and Vaughn Brown are the other two, a couple power speed outfield guys. So I could see really any of those guys really being floated in a deal, and them in order for them to try and bring back a star, whether they're trying to bring back Pete Alonso, if the Mets decide they are going to move him, or, I brought up Willie Adames or Corbin Burns, or, maybe one of those guys on the young players on the Cardinals or the Reds or the Orioles. There's a ton of young cost-controlled players that they might be interested. So, yeah, so this was my list. This was my thoughts on these. Tell me what you guys think. Tell me where you think I'm right, where you think I'm totally off base. Always love to hear the feedback. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be at EYD Show. and I'll put the link in the description. Like, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep trying to pump out more content. Hopefully we get some more news coming out for the Giants. But other than that, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye.